welcome to Unearthed Live with me, Greg Holder, and the rest of the Unearthed Live team. This is a show that digs deeper into the crossroads between nature and society and invites you, our viewers, to share their opinions. Now, today's topic is all about a new government policy. Is it boring? Is it dry? Yeah, the policy is. But that doesn't mean that today needs to be, because we are here. And myself and the rest of the amazing Unearthed Live team are going to take you on our journey of discovery in today's episode. And we're also going to show you a little bit about how we learned all about this bill and how we got this Unearthed Live together earlier in the week. In today's show, we're going to discuss a controversial new bill that is tabled by the Labour Party about a month ago. And it potentially pits our need for housing against our need for nature. But the government argues that the housing shortage needs to be addressed. This is without doubt an incredibly important bill, both for the most deprived in the UK, but also for our deprived nature. During this week's episode, we are going to hear from some amazing experts in the field, and also we're going to get a chance to hear from some of the general public. And as usual, we'll be opening up a page to hear from you, the viewers. We'll want to hear your views, and then we can discuss them later in the programme. So let's open up our online forum and get your thoughts. So follow the QR code on the screen now and send your opinions to us. Your thoughts, feelings, and how you feel about the bill. And don't worry if you don't know anything about it, and we still want to hear from you as the show goes on. But make sure you stick around and you'll have a much better understanding of the bill and how it affects you and our wildlife by the end of the show. Now, of course, we need to learn a lot more about biodiversity before we learn about the bill. So we've got Lizzie Narbert out in the field to tell us a bit more about biodiversity and why it's so important for you guys. Over to you, Lizzie.
From the buzzing bees to the towering trees, life on Earth is breathtaking. Now, this variety of plants, animals and fungi is what we call biodiversity, and it matters more than you might think. Biodiversity isn't just about wild animals on the savannas of Africa or the rainforests of Borneo. It's the tiny beetle under every log, the wildflowers in your local park, and the life in our oceans. It exists on every level, from tiny ants to the trees in this forest. Biodiversity provides us with food, filters our water, and cleans the air. Pollinators help grow crops, the wetlands prevent flooding, and forests lock away carbon. It's not only nature's life support system, it's ours too. And the more diverse it is, the more stable and resilient our whole world becomes. Having this diverse array of wildlife is essential for keeping our air filtered, our waterways clean, and putting food on our table. It's the life system that supports humanity. However, globally, we are facing a biodiversity crisis, and the UK is one of the most nature-depleted countries. But we still have time. Protecting biodiversity involves knowing it, valuing it, and aiming to keep life connected. Over the past 150 years, the UK has lost around 50% of its biodiversity, primarily due to human activities like construction. Currently, every 1 in 6 species is at risk of disappearing entirely. But there are projects, even locally here in Bristol, that are fighting to restore the environment that we so heavily rely on. I had the opportunity to speak to Henry Rossiter, the director and business developer of Belmont Estate, which is a project dedicated to restoring our natural environment and enhancing biodiversity net gain, or BNG as he refers to it.
Without the restoration of, or without nature being present within planet Earth, we simply will not survive. Nature is the sole basis for our food, our safe water systems, our medicine, the way that we commute, the way that we live. In terms of how we're doing about it, not well. In terms of Great Britain especially, we are really great at destroying nature. Out of the 240 countries and territories in the world, in a recent UN study, we found that England in particular was number 232. So we're the 8th least biodiverse country in the world. Obviously, with Labour's pledge to build 1.5 million homes, they are wanting to streamline the potential challenges in terms of development. They shouldn't remove BNG. They should simply make it more easier to achieve, because we come back to the earlier point in the fact that as a country who is dwindling on nature, and we need it to be able to produce the food that we need to survive as a society, it's essential that we attend to those.
I'm Alice Milner, and I'm in the studio with Lizzie, who is here to tell us more about what she found out during her chat with Henry. So, Lizzie, why is the UK nature in one of the worst states globally?
Well, there's lots of reasons for why nature loss is happening. I mean, in the UK, the main reasons would be land use change, infrastructure and development's a really big one, and habitat fragmentation, which is where habitats get broken up. And what was really interesting in my chat with Henry is he also mentioned that our disconnection with nature is also exacerbating this issue. And so particularly with these like housing and development projects, because we've lost that connection with nature, what that means is that we're not really considering the environment whilst we're building new houses. And then biodiversity loss is then just being exacerbated. Yeah.
Right, so how do we go about building this reconnection with nature?
Well, the disconnection's vast, and so the way to get it back is going to take a lot of work, but what that means is places like Belmont Estate, Henry was saying, is they run these sort of reconnection with nature projects, and they bring in school-age children, but also business corporations for sort of team building days. And what that means is they are educated on why biodiversity is so important, and also like it just emphasises that we rely on biodiversity in every day of our lives, so they can be really beneficial for that. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that development, things like housing and roads, is a major driver of biodiversity loss. Some of our viewers might be at home and be thinking, but we need more homes, more schools and more infrastructure.
Yeah.
So what's currently in place to help limit the environmental damage from all of this?
Well, there's quite a lot of government policies sort of in place, but one thing that Belmont does is they do this thing called biodiversity net gain, and Henry called it BNG. And what this means is, you know, these developing companies create a lot of environmental damage where they're building new houses, but they have to offset that damage elsewhere. And that can be places like Belmont, places where they're rewilding nature. So that can be really beneficial. But, you know, there's sort of legislation in place, which means when you're building new houses, you have to plant trees, you have to put in place green spaces for the communities that are going to move into those areas. So that's also really important. But what's quite interesting is that recently the government has actually been trying to change these legislations that developing companies have to follow. And so this might mean that developing companies have to jump through less hoops. And yeah, that might change.
Thanks, Lizzie. So that leads us on to the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. And to help us unpack this rather hefty piece of legislation, we're going to talk to Ben Clifford. He's a Professor of Spatial Planning and Governance at UCL. Ben, can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Okay, great. So our first question for you is, for our listeners, could you please just outline the bill and why it's important that we streamline planning and infrastructure in the UK?
The bill's trying to streamline planning and infrastructure to support delivering sort of major infrastructure projects and the delivery of more housing. So it's thinking about community consultation, who's taking the decisions, and also the processes of environmental assessment that go on when decisions are being made about new development schemes.
Okay, great. So part of the bill that aims to reduce the environmental red tape. Could you tell us a bit more about that and the challenges and benefits that could come with it?
Yes. So what's perhaps been labelled as red tape is particularly the bit that's around kind of taking a scheme by scheme assessment of the likely impacts on protected sites and species, and saying instead of doing mitigation on a individual scheme by scheme basis, instead perhaps developers could pay into a pot of money that's used to think about nature improvements on a wider scale.
Okay, and how do you think this could affect our wildlife in the UK? What are some potential challenges that we could see? Yeah.
So there's been a lot of sort of negative coverage. Things like the high-speed 2 railway. There was, talk of the tens of millions of pounds spent on a tunnel to protect bats. You quite often get discussion about newts and things, and it's sort of held up that this is holding us back from development, particularly that there's a housing crisis. The issue is, though, that if you allow on a site-by-site basis there to be damage to habitats, this could be quite significant for environment. We're in a very nature-depleted country. And so how well are we able to kind of take payments and try and pool them and think about environmental protection on a wider geography than just an individual development? Or is it best just to tie it to that individual development that's going on and make sure there's certainty about environmental protection each time anything new is being proposed for development?
Okay, well, on that note, so do you think it's a possibility to, have the best of both worlds, streamline planning and infrastructure without potentially sacrificing environmental protections, or is that a lot harder to manage as the nature of the bill?
That's what the government's hoping to achieve through these measures, but it's really, really challenging, actually. And what's sometimes labelled as red tape, to other people is measures and protections which are there to help protect nature given the climate crisis, given biodiversity loss. So it's really difficult to find a way that is going to allow development to go ahead without being held up, but at the same time to make sure that it's not going to cause environmental damage. And this is a tension that's really, really long standing in kind of development and planning debates.
Okay, well, on a more local scale, how do you think the bill could affect the ability of local communities and councillors in having a say on the projects near them?
So the bill's proposing what it's going to call a national scheme of delegation. So that determines whether a professional planning officer makes a decision on a planning application or elected councillors. And it wants elected councillors to be involved less than at present, because the government thinks that also will streamline the planning system and perhaps reduce kind of objections to development. But the corollary of that is does that mean there's less opportunity for people to feel like they've had a say and that they've been able to influence development? And again, it's quite a fine balancing act that the government's trying to do between delivering development that it says is needed, particularly housing, but not doing so in a way that sort of makes communities feel not listened to.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Ben. Thank you very much. And we're going back to Lizzie. Lizzie, can you tell us any more?
Yes, thanks, Alice. So the government has brought in this new bill to try and tackle the worsening housing crisis in the UK. And the thing is, the UN has said that adequate housing is a fundamental human right. And they said, the centre of our social, emotional, and sometimes economic lives, a home should be a sanctuary, a place to live in peace, security, and dignity. So although housing is a human right, the UK is currently falling short. But why is this? Well, we've got overcrowding, there's homelessness on the rise, and currently 1 in 4 adults aged between 20 and 24 still live at home.
Now, this is due to a combination of things. You know, our population is growing, houses aren't being built quick enough, and the homes that do exist, well, they're unaffordable. And just to add to this crisis, the connection between people and nature is weakening. And this is partly due to the attempts to solve the housing crisis. Now, researchers at Exeter University are saying that the new developments being built are receiving more green spaces compared to the areas that aren't receiving any development. And there are worries that the spatial social inequality may be worsened by environmental restoration only taking place at these new housing estates. Okay. So the Labour government has set an ambitious target to build 1.5 million new homes by 2029. But will this planning and infrastructure bill be enough to meet this target? And will our access to nature be heavily divided depending on where these new housing developments are being put up? Well, if you're concerned about your diminishing access to nature due to these developments, we want to hear from you. Scan the QR code and let us know your thoughts. How are you being impacted by this housing crisis? You could be a renter, a buyer, or you could just be families nationwide. If you feel impacted, we want to hear from you. What are you experiencing? Now, whilst we're waiting to hear what you think, B headed down into Bristol city centre to see what the general public knows and thinks of this upcoming bill.
I'm here in the city centre and I want to know, does anyone know about the bill? And if so, what do they think about it? Thanks for joining me. Have you heard of the Planning and Infrastructure Bill?
No.
No, I have not. I have not heard of it at all.
To be honest, I have no idea.
No.
No.
No, actually not.
I feel like I should have, but I can't think what it is unless you prompt me further.
So now you understand a bit about the bill, what do you think about it?
I don't think any development would be called a sustainable development if it, neglects the nature.
My worry is that they're building so much on floodplains and the areas where there isn't an infrastructure really for community. And I don't think that's been taken into consideration. It's like they're building a lot of houses.
I definitely want to preserve environmental spaces, and I feel like this government is not standing up or committing to the environmental policies that they sort of stated they were going to do.
Well, I think it depends for me. I think I'd probably need to know more because, we have a housing crisis, but we also have an environmental crisis on our hands, so I guess it depends what it says in the fine print.
I think anything that compromises green space is not a good thing, particularly in city spaces like this. I think one of the reasons Bristol is so popular is for its green space. So if that's going to be compromised, then I think that's a really bad idea.
So I don't feel so good about the bill still.
Well, yeah, I think the environmental awareness is something that is each of our responsibility. But the planet is alive. That's the thing that has seemed to got lost in the dialogue. It's actually a living ecosystem. It's a living system. And unless the conditions are right, then the planet is not able to perform what it's here to do, which is to keep us alive. And I feel very strongly about that.
Thank you. Thank you. So while I couldn't find anyone that knew what the bill was, it's clear that the public are aware that there's a housing crisis, but that they don't want new developments to come at the expense of their green spaces. We've learned a lot here from the public today. Over to you in the studio.
It's clear that this bill is really dividing opinions. So now we want to hear from you. Throughout the show, we've asked you to share your thoughts and questions on the bill and what you think should be done. But before we go to your questions and your messages, we're going to just share a short excerpt from an opinion piece by George Monbiot. So George is a British journalist, a staunch environmental campaigner, and it's clear to see from this title piece that he is not a particularly big fan of the bill. In this piece, George highlights some of his biggest worries about the bill, including this very strongly written quote. This bill betrays an undemocratic impatience with the people motivated by the blatant appeasement of corporate power, just as the US is captured by a billionaire death cult our government is opening the door to the same forces. Well, it's clear to see that George is not a fan, but we really want to know what you guys think at home. So we've now closed the chat, and over the next few minutes, we've got a live poll open to see what you think. Now you understand a little bit more about the bill. So follow the QR code and you can go and vote whether you support the bill or not. So follow the QR code now and make sure you get your vote in. Now, while we vote, or while you guys vote, we're going to have a look at some of the questions that you've been asking. So let's see what we've got. We've got some brilliant questions here. I will remind you guys that I'm no expert in this field, so some of these advanced questions like, will it affect my house prices? What would biodiversity credits for the public be for the public or homeowner work? Brilliant questions. I'm not the person to answer. Please do. It's great that you guys have shown interest in this now. Go to your local MPs, or particularly reach out to your local Green MPs or politicians to really understand more about this and ask these questions to them. Show that you care about this bill and question it. What else do we have? Do you think this bill is the start of a slippery slope? What's next? A concrete wasteland? That is a great question. And in my personal opinion, it does worry me that this could be a slippery slope. As soon as you start removing these protections that we've put in place because of the damage we've done in the past, I do feel like it is a backwards step. So it is a bit worrying that the government is doing that. Although, of course, we don't want to take away the importance of the housing crisis. Absolutely, we're acknowledging the importance of the housing crisis. But as you saw from the experts and from the public, I think everyone agrees that it's just not to be done at the cost of our nature. Let's just take one more comment here. I think this is a great one to finish on, which is I would love to live somewhere with biodiversity around me. Absolutely, I think everyone feels the same way. There's a lot of research showing how amazingly good it is for you to be surrounded by nature regularly. So if we can actually live in places with biodiversity around us, that will make a huge difference to mental health and all sorts of other factors. So absolutely, definitely, great comment, and I agree, without doubt. So now we're going to move on from the questions. For our last segment of today, we're going to head out live outside in our local garden and show you some of the smaller things we can do to help biodiversity. But before we do that, we have a little treat for you. So obviously this story is very current. This bill is currently going between the House of Commons and the House of Lords. And so, as you may have guessed, we've had to put this show together in a really short timeline. So what we thought we'd do is show you a little bit more about how we put this show together in just 4 days. So what we're going to do is we're going to take you behind the scenes of Unearthed Live. Right, so we've just got our brief and we're going live in 4 days, and we've got to talk about a bill that none of us actually know anything about. So we need to do a lot of research, we need to find some experts, and we need to be ready to go live in 4 days. Let's go.
What's the weather looking like, Greg?
Oh, we can beat that one out.
No, sorry.
Yeah.
Beep!
There we go. We're just about to head down to Queen's Avenue to see what the general public think about the new planning and infrastructure bill. Is it Vox Pop? Vox Pox?
What does that stand for?
Hiya, can I ask if you've got a couple minutes just to answer some questions for a bit?
I'm really sorry, I normally would, but I'm
No worries, no worries.
just filmed my VT about biodiversity. It's harder to walk off camera than you might think. It's tricky, but hopefully you've got the shot.
Lined up an interview with Ben Clifford, who's Professor of Spatial Planning at the UCL, but he was named by Apolitical as one of the 100 most influential academics in the government in the UK. So, it's a big deal.
Are we ready to go?
On the marks, get set, go.
Cut!
Okay, so you can see that was a bit of a roller coaster, and we've managed to make it out here into the garden in time. That was a bit of a close call. I'm a little bit out of end of May to allow all those small insects and pollinators to come out of hibernation and feed up and get strong and healthy, and for other around the green spaces before we cut our lawn. Some of the other things we want to do is have high biodiversity. So allotments and gardens are really great for biodiversity. The largest proportion of green spaces in a city with about 35% of the green space. Therefore, it's a real opportunity to allow biodiversity to thrive in these areas, as well as allotments. Allotments come sort of second in that and are great places for biodiversity as well. So what we're going to do now, I think, is we're going to head to a close-up of our strawberry down here. Maybe Alice can follow me in as well. And we're going to check out, see if there's anything live down there. Nope, can't see anything. You've gone portrait. Okay. Well, that's live TV for you. We've not actually got that much. I can't see any pollinators or anything in this beautiful garden, which is very unusual. But there you go. That's live TV. Don't ever work with animals, even pollinators. So this brings us to the end of the show. I hope you've really enjoyed it. I hope you've learned a lot more about this really important bill and highlight some things that you might want to talk to your MPs, your friends, experts about, to really understand what you want the government to do according to this bill. But thank you so much for tuning in to Unearthed Live. This also brings us to the end of Better Planet Live 2025 with the group of master's students at the University of Bristol studying science communications for a better planet. We want to say thank you to everyone who's helped us throughout the year, particularly Steve and Andy as directors. Absolutely so grateful for you. And then this week, we absolutely want to say a massive thank you to Ellie Mackay, who has absolutely kept us alive this week throughout the filming and everything. We really want to say a massive, massive thank you to you and everyone who's been involved. But until next time, we'll see you later. Yeah.